Welcome to the first episode of The Circular Future. My name is Stephanie McLarty, Head of Sustainability at Quantum Lifecycle Partners. In today's conversation, we are looking at how the reuse and recycling of electronics has changed and where it's going. I'm talking with Quantum's president, Gary Diamond, on the evolution he's experienced and the trends that we're seeing that will define the next year and beyond. It's all part of The Circular Future. Today, we are looking back and ahead. The electronic waste, or what's known as e-waste industry, basically started in the mid-1970s. Take TVs as an example. By the mid-1950s, about half of all American homes had a TV, and it was black and white, of course. It wasn't until 1972 that the sales of color TVs surpassed the black and white sets. And as technology turned over, e-waste was becoming a thing and a growing problem. So governments intervened and regulations were soon introduced in the mid-1970s. One of the biggest challenges became the flow of e-waste to be dumped in less developed countries. And the Basel Convention of 1989 was signed to stop the flow. Since then, the e-waste industry grew and has constantly evolved, and we will continue to see significant changes as our tech gadgets evolve as well. I can't think of anyone better to talk about these changes than Quantum Lifecycle President Gary Diamond. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks, Steph. This is awesome.
I think so.
Yeah, it's cool.
So let's go back to how you got started in this industry, because you were founder of Shift Recycling and you've seen a lot of changes since you started. So tell us how you got into this.
So we're going to go way back to 2001 when I moved from South Africa to Canada. I went to university in London, Ontario. Studied a business degree, law school, practiced law a couple of years, but always wanted to start a business. And that opportunity came in 2010 when I left law and started up another company doing solar rooftop development. That's putting solar panels on large industrial roofs. And I was meeting with people that had roofs and people that had money. And one of the groups that I met with said, we're not interested in investing in solar, but we want to start an e-waste company. And to be honest, that was the first time that I ever heard the word e-waste. I went away on a ski trip to Whistler, weighing up my options between, staying in solar, which I thought, definitely, had legs and could be a great business in the long term, or partnering with this group of people that had a little bit more of an established footprint and a little bit more support for me, and starting up an electronics recycling company in the e-waste industry. And I came back and I decided to take that route. And the first thing I did was go to the offices, and they had a computer, and I took apart the computer. And I weighed the outputs, I weighed the ferrous metal, I weighed the circuit boards, I weighed the hard drive, I weighed the RAM, the CPU, and I realized that you could sell all of these components for some value. And then went back to the drawing board and figured out how to get more than one computer. So I sent a flyer downtown to the law firm that I used to work at, and actually, started to find that a lot of companies really had no idea what to do with their old electronics. They had rooms similar to the size that we're sitting in today, just full of electronics and just kind of like waiting for someone to come and pick them up. So they would reply saying, "Sure, we've got a whole bunch. Come and get them." So I'd rent a truck, I'd go downtown, I'd pick up the electronics, I'd bring them back, I'd take apart some, send more postcards, hired someone to drive the truck, hired someone to start taking apart the electronics, and really just grew the business very, very organically. All at the same time, at the beginning, there was a program, and we started in Toronto, in Ontario. There was a program by the name of the Ontario Electronic Stewardship Program, and this is, as you were saying, how governments were coming up with ways to ensure that electronics weren't being shipped overseas or going into landfill. So the OES program started in 2009, and I started in the business in 2011. So it was really fortuitous in that I was able to plug into the program, and the electronics that we couldn't recycle for value or we couldn't reuse, there was the program that we could send it into in order to recycle. And over the years, we became a more significant processor and started to process more and more types of equipment, to the point at which, we really were the largest processor in Ontario. That's
it just grew from there.
Just grew.
So first of all, I love this image of you're a lawyer, or maybe we should say recovering lawyer.
Definitely.
And yet you're there, you're hands-on, you're figuring this stuff out, and you've grown the business. You grew the business significantly, and then it became Quantum. So I want to talk to you about the changes, what happened back then versus now. Now, stewardship programs are still around, but they've changed significantly.
Yeah.
How have they changed?
No, so definitely, when we talk about stewardship programs, and in Ontario, it's definitely had a significant change over the last few years. I mentioned the OES program, and that ceased to exist at the end of 2020, and in the beginning of 2021, there was a new regulatory structure which was set up to create a more competitive environment, as opposed to one organization that was responsible for ensuring that electronics were diverted from landfill. You now have, I think it's more than 10 what we call producer responsibility organizations, which are able to work with producers, the manufacturers and retailers, first importers, who by law have an obligation to reuse or recycle and recover commodities from electronics. So the fundamental difference is that as opposed to having one organization, we have a multitude of organizations that can fulfill those obligations. We operate across Canada in every jurisdiction, as well as in Costa Rica. And to be honest, every jurisdiction has a little bit of a different spin on what we call extended producer responsibility. Some of them are run by one organization, some of them are run by an extension of government, some of them are more competitive, free market environment. And, we have to figure out how to operate in all of them. And over time, things will change. But really our values don't change, of just running a good business with good people, trying to extract as much value as possible in a compliant way according to our certifications. But definitely the stewardship model and the concept of extended producer responsibility has changed and will continue to change and evolve. So it's an exciting industry to be a part of. Yeah,
for sure. And I'm sure with the changes, there's been both challenges and opportunities, as well as there usually always are. So what about the types of material that you've seen over the course of your career? Because technology has certainly shifted tremendously in the last 10 years, even more. What was technology like back when you first started Shift?
So a decade ago, more than 65% of the material that came through the door were old cathode ray tube TVs. And when I say 65%, I mean weight. Like how we think about our business and how we track our business, especially on the recycling side. The weight of product was the old CRT TVs, which have glass and leaded glass. And it's really the reason we were able to become a processor, because the best way to process that material is by hand. There's not really good machinery that can separate that. And we were able just to run a good business that understood our efficiencies and understood our margins and be able to process that type of material. Today, CRTs account for less than 5% of what we receive. So the nature of what comes through the waste stream changes. So it's changed a lot. The material coming through the waste stream today, I would say, is more complicated than CRTs, a lot more embedded batteries, potentially a lot more opportunity for reuse, refurbishment, which is one of the things that we really focus on, try and repair, refurbish, or reuse something before it's being recycled for commodities. And then the stuff that is being recycled for commodities, the material leads itself to the type of machinery that we've invested in shredding and separating through magnets and eddy currents and optical sorters and density separation. So kind of like we made an investment into that, about 5 years ago, that our machines are very busy shredding up the type of electronics. And it's really mixed electronics that are coming through the door.
Right. And so when you look forward, and I know you are a visionary person and you're looking ahead 3 years, 5 years, even beyond that, where do you think in terms of the material and how you deal with it, where is that going?
Yeah, so definitely one of the challenges, but potentially opportunities in our industry is this concept of lightweighting. When we look at the statistics of the available e-waste in the market, there's a common thought that this is getting more and more and more. The truth is that is true on a per unit basis. So there's definitely more units entering the waste stream, but those units are all getting lighter. So there's this phenomenon called lightweighting. One of the things that we really focus on is trying to think about how do we extract as much value as possible for each unit, as opposed to just thinking about everything on a weight basis. So that's one of the reasons that we're really, passionate about improving our refurbishment, repair, reuse capabilities before we're actually just recycling for commodities. So just looking forward to the future, I do see lightweighting continue for a period of time. That doesn't mean that we're not going to see more number of units, but definitely we're going to see less weight in general. I think that there's going to continue to be more proliferation of embedded batteries, which is a real challenge for us from a health and safety and potential fire risk. Although, we have a way of dealing with that, and we're just going to have to continue to get better at doing that. Once I was in a cab in Ottawa, and I remember telling the driver, the industry I worked in, and he said, eventually that's going to go away because everything's just going to be holograms. And I don't think we're there yet in the next 3 years or 5 years, but definitely, electronics are constantly evolving and changing. But the one thing I've seen over the last decade is that even though it changes and evolves, there's more different types, whether it's, mobile phones or wearables or the Internet of Things that everything's connected with a circuit board. The types of products that we're going to be recycling in the future is not stuff that we've thought of today, but the same kind of innovation and relentless curiosity which our organization has is something that will apply to how to handle that wave of electronics which is going to come at us.
For sure. My husband has a coffee cup that has an embedded circuit board and battery in it because it keeps his coffee warm for an hour or 2 hours after. And to me, that's the ultimate thing. Who would have thought a coffee cup would be e-waste? But it's with the Internet of Things, with smart things, more and more things are moving that way. And we don't think of it necessarily on a consumer level of what will happen to this at its end of life. So on a service level, where do you think things are going? Are customers going to be asking us the same questions in the future as they are today? Will they need different things than they do today?
Yeah, I think if we think back, a decade ago, customers were kind of just happy just to get rid of their stuff. And I think today we're having more and more conversations with our customers who are interested in what's happening to their stuff. And they're not okay with just knowing that they're working with a certified recycler. They want to know what's happening to the material. They want to understand their own carbon impact, and we help them through sustainability reporting that we can tell them through reuse and recycling the positive benefits of what happened to their material from a carbon reduction perspective. So I think it's just part of this theme where customers are thirsty for knowledge when it comes to ESG, environmental, social, governance issues. And I think like we're very, very lucky to be working in an industry with the tailwinds of ESG, in that like we, provide positive environmental impacts every single day. And I think that we're going to continue to get more embedded in our customers' businesses as they transition from a linear way of thinking about their supply chain to a more circular way of thinking of their supply chain. And that's not just reuse and recycling. It's how does one extend the life of a product in a smart way, and extend it to the point at which you can't extend it any further, and then recover the resources so that you can take those resources and put it back into the manufacturing supply chain. We're having more conversations on that level than we've ever had. And I think that's going to continue in different industries and different sizes of business. So it's super exciting.
It is exciting. And I've seen the nature of the conversations change as well. Even in the last 6 to 12 months, we have customers now saying, I want to communicate this. I want to do the right thing. And then I want to communicate this to our retail customers. And so they're thinking about it from an awareness, education piece, sort of closing the loop from just the operational side, which is fascinating to me that we're at that level of thinking. And let's be honest, people probably didn't know, for the most part, what ESG stood for even, 2 years ago. So yeah. I think it's really exciting. What about the use of technology as it applies to this? Do you think that's going to significantly change in the future?
One of our strategic objectives is just to infuse technology into every aspect of the business. And, what you're talking about in being able to quantify and talk to our customers and give them the tools in order to show their positive environmental impacts. We spend a lot of energy and effort and resources on our software systems that, we're super optimized from the point of which we're adding a customer to scheduling a lot, to receiving that lot, working through the material, reusing assets, recycling assets, and reporting that back to the customer in a timely, clean fashion that's like digestible for that customer. And, we're in every aspect of the business, whether it's operations or finance or compliance, we're putting tools into the business to make it easier to do, with quicker access to information and data. So I think we're doing a phenomenal job there. I think every business is thinking about this, and it all is kind of like part of this loop where we're also at the end of this able to take all of the hardware infrastructure in order to reuse, recycle, all of that, which is facilitating this technological proliferation.
Yeah, for sure. So I have one last question for you, and I'm going to put you on the spot. What would you say is one piece of advice you would give to folks who are trying to think ahead for their company and position themselves for their company? What should they do to position themselves?
We have identified 3 key stakeholders at Quantum. Number 1 is the team. It's the people that we work with every single day. Number 2 is our customers. And number 3 is the planet. And, I think the advice I would give to somebody is to, clarify your why. And I think, that's the Simon Sinek book. But for us, I think we've done a good job of clarifying, the key stakeholders that every single day we can have a positive impact on. I'd like to think, I started this business, and I started a business because, I thought that I was good at being able to see a vision and muster a lot of people around me to work towards that. and self-actualize through that. And I think of our team. We have 450 people working at Quantum. We have a great culture. People like coming to work. And that gives me an immense amount of satisfaction that I can positively impact my team members every single day. We work with thousands of customers, and it gives me immense amount of satisfaction that we provide a great service. We are trustworthy, that our customers can sleep well at night, that they're working with Quantum, that we're doing right for the environment, doing right by their data security, and hopefully maximizing the value of their electronics in the way along the way. And last but not least, we're super lucky that we work in a business and an industry that's doing right for the planet. Reusing electronics, recovering the resources from electronics. This is God's work. So the advice I'd give to anyone is just clarify, who you're really doing this for and why you're doing it. And I think we've done a great job at Quantum of identifying that. And I think that's why we have people at Quantum who want to work here.
That's right. And that's why the staff are called sustainability superheroes.
True.
So thank you. That's great advice to think about your why, probably both on a personal and on a professional level, and to align towards that. So thank you so much, Gary. That was amazing. You are such a wealth of knowledge and inspiration here.
Steph, thanks to you. Super excited to kick off the podcast series, and looking forward to future episodes.
That's it for today's episode. Join us to learn more about the virtues of reuse versus recycling in our next episode. Head over to quantumlifecycle.com/podcasts or follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. This is a Quantum Lifecycle podcast, and the producers are Sanjay Trivedi and Faiza Govani. See you next time.